And welcome back, guys, to the final round. My name is Jake, and here we are, several hours after the end of Canelo Alvarez versus Terence Bud Crawford. It's gonna be a pretty quick video, pretty much just about my immediate reaction to the fight. So, let's get right into it. It was a good fight. Let's just start with the boxing. Part of the event. I will be going a separate video into what I think of the overall event and the White's promotion and everything that's outside of the ring. This is just a quick thought about this fight in the ring. I'm gonna make my the big boxing weekend review number 2. But that's gonna be talking about Lewis Crocker. Uh, you know, at this point, truly defeating Patty Donovan to win the IBF welterweight title. Um, I'll go a lot into Noy anyway. Defeating MJ Maktal. Yeah, defeating Murjaran Makhmadaliev, and then obviously into the rest of the cards, and obviously the undercard of Canelo Crawford. But this is just about this fight in the ring. I think there was so much talk all week about, is Canelo too big? Is Bud too fast? Like all the things that every fight has in build up. And it was great. And now that I look back on it, about 6 hours, maybe about 10, 11 hours since the fight happened, or however long it's been, probably 14, whatever it is. Now that I've thought about the last week or so, I do feel like that Andre Ward made a point, and I will talk about the commentary team on my video about the whole event. That's not to do with the ring. Oh, freaking eye hurting me. Jesus. That doesn't really have much to do in the ring. But this is just in the ring. Everyone was talking about all the different aspects. Is Canelo too big? Is power? Blah blah. I think it comes down to 3 things, and that's how we got here, where Terence Bud Crawford defeated Canelo Alvarez by unanimous decision to become the undisputed, obviously undisputed and undefeated. Undisputed, unified, 168-pound champion, the undisputed super middleweight champion of the world. It's a division that had never been unified up until Canelo, and now obviously continue being unified. Why? But which is not going to last long. He's not going to stay in this weight class. I'll get to that later on in the big boxing preview show. But this fight was, as I said, like this last 2 weeks, people were saying so much about it that honestly, I came to a point in my head where I was hearing so much different things that when I did the big boxing, the big boxing, I'm not review the preview episode, which I did, which awesome, got like 80 views, which is pretty good. Thank you guys. That I wasn't really sure how I was thinking. I think I was obviously leaning towards more Canelo, but I think one point that people made, and shout out to the guys at Proper Boxing and a number of channels that pointed this out, and Antonio Tarver and a bunch of guys. Mike Coppinger, really, I'll give him credit. He's not my favorite boxing analyst, and I'm a reporter. He says a lot of dumb stuff. Like he said on the desk the other night, I think on Friday, that he would pick Jack Johnson to be the greatest heavyweight champion of all time. I think that's as great as Jack Johnson was. He was, for his time 100 years ago at the turn of 20th century, he was revolutionary. He wouldn't even last in the 50s, in my opinion. Just it was a different time. Guys were slower, and most of the guys he fought were 6'1", 6'2", 6'3". He was the first big giant, but still. One thing that Coppinger made a point of was he said that in this fight we're really going to figure out who's the better boxer, because Coppinger picked Canelo on the basis that Canelo was the overall better boxer at this point in their career, obviously citing the lack of serious, as I mentioned in my popcorn resume video, before this fight, about how outside of Spence, Bud hasn't fought any world guys. And Bud made a point there this week. He said that, like, okay, well, because Ricky Burns and Victor Postal and a number of those guys weren't as commercialized. Fans forget how good they were, and as someone who values himself, knowing a lot of boxing knowledge, I can, as I said in the pound for pound video about both guys, have fought in a number of legit world level champions at the time they fought them. They fought many guys in their prime. Many guys in their prime fought these two guys, and these two guys beat them. All I was saying is that true pound for pound level guys, Bud has faced two. Canelo's faced probably, with Crawford, truly only really three. I'd like to go four. There's a number of guys you could maybe include in there. That Canelo's fought in, but he had the slight edge in that. But going into the fight, it was really 2-1 or 3-1 or whatever. But I think as the fight was nearing closer, I had this feeling that all the time, and as I mentioned, the second thing that I mentioned, or was going to bring up after the first point I made was the fact, that Bud had really beefed up and had put some good weight on and was moving well for the weight class, but we weren't sure how he was going to look at this new weight, two weight classes. As I mentioned in the big boxing preview video, that I was feeling this fight was going to be reminiscent of when Sugar Ray Leonard went up and fought Marvin Hagler. And to be honest, looking back at it, as it happened yesterday, there were moments of Leonard Hagler. There weren't enough moments. The moments of Leonard Hagler were the moments where Sugar Ray scored. This was Sugar Ray Leonard versus Marvin Hagler, but there was no Hagler. Canelo was not Hagler last night. And to be honest, I was going to say this for the end of the video, but I'm going to say it now. And this goes to my I'll come back to that in a second. My third point being that people had said, is Canelo still the same after Bivol? Because he had all these decisions. He really came back after he lost to Bivol. I think we can all agree the overall period in his career from when he probably beat because after the loss to Mayweather, he was 23. He was young. Even though he got back in there against Kirkland and Mangulo and other guys quickly, and Lara, he still did, to me, he entered his prime, his true prime. He entered it after the first Triple G fight. Because you got to be honest, when you look at, Canelo Alvarez, you have to be fully honest with yourself and go, when did he really get his prime? Well, the truth of the matter is he really got his prime. You have to, let's be honest here. When he fought Triple G the first time, he was 27 years old. Most guys don't get into their prime until 26, 27. I think he unlocked his true prime after the first Triple G fight, not before. He had great performances. He had the great win over Amir Khan, Liam Smith. Obviously beat the crap out of Chavez Jr. A blowout. Chavez, they didn't win one round, but he had he had beaten Kirkland, Cotto, Khan, Smith, Chavez Jr. Average Triple G when they had that draw, which I think everyone can agree that it was a bullshit decision by Adelaide Bird. She's a terrible judge. Triple G won the first fight. In the second fight, you saw Canelo really come together, put a massive game plan together and figure out a way to win that fight. And he did. And that night in 2018, when he was, I think, was he 28? He was 28 years old. And Triple G was 36. It was funny because that was really the last prime of Triple G's career. Looking back on it now, obviously people still thought he had, everyone still thought that Triple G still had some prime, even up until his third fight with Canelo. But to be honest, if you look at his career, he really, the last, dominant win of his true prime was the Danny Jacobs win, which was a great decision, which was a tough fight for him. And Danny Jacobs was the first guy to ever go the distance with him. Which really, I think, if you're Canelo, you were able to see first fight with Danny Jacobs, how I can beat this guy. And really, he knocked out Steve Rolls. And The fight with Sergey Derevyanchenko that he had at MSG in 2019, I thought that Derevyanchenko won that fight. I thought Derevyanchenko won that fight. I still think of it to this day. I know he was down in round one, but I thought he won all the later rounds. But it was still a close fight. And really, people said after he beat, he had 2 years off, and then he came back and he beat the Murata Murata, who was the IBF champion, and the IBO champion. He defeats him in that front. It was, oh, is he back? And the truth was, he wasn't back. The truth was, he wasn't back. He was able to still because he's still better, but he was 40 years old when he fought Canelo for the third time. And the truth of the matter was, Canelo at 28, really for me, it went from the second Triple G fight all the way until the Caleb Plant fight, which was a period of about 3 or 4 years, where Canelo was the best fighter on planet Earth in the true only face of boxing. You had some good heavyweight stuff going on, but really he was the biggest. I mean, he was for even before Triple G, he was already becoming the face. After that second fight, he became the face of boxing. Even after he lost to Bivol, he still faced boxing. But go back to my point, people were saying he hasn't looked like he's recovered from the Bivol fight, and I was going back and forth. I'm like, is he back? Is he there? Is he the same? And after watching what happened last night, he clearly, because one thing is true, you never really know if a guy has recovered from a disastrous loss, which it was a disastrous loss. I mean, it was a close fight, but it was a disastrous loss. Even Bivol was 19-0. Canelo was supposed to go in there, and I think everyone knew he wasn't going to outbox Bivol, but people suspected he would outland Bivol, and it would be similar to how he beat Callum Smith. People thought that Bivol was just a harder hitting version of Callum Smith. I mean, people were saying that it was going to be similar to his second win over Triple G, and I agreed at the time. And you realize Bivol isn't Triple G. Bivol isn't as hard as a hitter, but he's honestly a better technical, not far better, but a very amazing technical boxer. And he uses, he used everything to win that fight. And I think it's one of those fights that Canelo put everything he had. And it wasn't even that long after the Plant fight. The Plant fight was in November of 2021. The Bivol fight was in April of 22. It's only about 6 months, and he had 6 months. I remember for his fight against Plant, he had a difficult weight cut because when he fought Billy Joe Saunders, I remember seeing something from Eddie Reynoso, because remember he beat Callum Smith 2020. He defeated, Mr. Abney, Yael Jim, absolute can in 3 rounds. But then 3 months later, he fought Billy Joe Saunders. When he fought Yael Jim, he was still slimming, because when he fought Billy Joe Saunders, he wanted, who was 30-0 and who at the time was, I don't think he was pound for, on the resume video, I said that at the time Saunders was 30-0. I think 2 division champ. People thought that Billy Joe Saunders was one of the best fighters in the world, and he was great, but Billy Joe, I think, was he was a year older. He didn't have much left in the tank, honestly. Actually, I don't think Billy Joe Saunders has fought since then. No, he hasn't fought since he's retired, which is probably smart for his career, honestly. Canelo put everything into that win against him. He beat the crap out of Billy Joe Saunders, and I think the amount that he expended in the Saunders win and the Plant win, which were, I think, 2 of his greatest victories in his entire career. Looking back on it, Billy Joe Saunders has never fought again, but his 30-0 record was a legitimate 30-0. Plant at 21-0 hadn't been the greatest, but had he was a rough, tough, strong counterpuncher, strong puncher, and those 2 wins took everything out of Canelo. I think to get those wins, and they're great performances. And then when he fought Bivol, he thought, I think everything went wrong that night, and he just, for whatever reason, I think his body, because really, Canelo, if he had fought in guys like Plant, let's say he stays at 168 after being Caleb Plant, defends 2 or 3 more times, and then he fights Bud Crawford, is he still in his prime today? Probably not, but he's probably got a couple more years. What Bivol did is what I call a shock prime exit. And he was able to take a guy in Canelo who we thought was still in his prime. even though he had a ton of fights, we thought Canelo, this is the best Canelo's ever looked. And there was every expectation he was going to go up there and he was going to beat Bivol. It'd be close, but people thought he would beat Bivol like he did Triple G in the second fight, and and then he would get back to the top at light heavy, and he would stay there. Because I think Canelo made it clear before the fight, if he wins the fight with Bivol, he's gonna he wanted to unify. Which, looking back on it, he would have had to fight Beterbiev, and that's a whole different thing. I don't think he wins that fight at that point either. But once he lost that fight to Bivol, he hasn't recovered. And the third Triple G fight was more the fact that Triple G was 40 years old, and it was his second fight in almost 3 years. He wasn't really active, and it was a good fight for Canelo, but we all knew he was going to finish Triple G. It was really the next couple fights that were like, oh, he beat John Ryder. He should have finished him in round 5. Should have finished him in round 8. He should have finished him in that fight. He dominated, but when he couldn't put away John Ryder, I go, eh. Jermell Charlo, who he beat by decision, was a different fight. Charlo did mostly run for most of the fight. He tried to box, but it didn't really work at all, and Canelo beat him. That was fine. The Munguia fight, who was 43-0, but whatever. As I said years before and after that, it was never a legit 43-0. It was a 43-0 with maybe only about 6 or 5 actual good opponents, really. And he beat the crap out of Munguia. And also, he's having guys who were coming up quickly to fight him. Then you have Berlanga, who was mostly a middleweight and most 68 guy at sometimes. He gets him, and for Munguia and Berlanga, and for John Ryder, he really should have finished both guys. That's just truth of the matter. I mean, Bruno Sarase, who is a good, solid fighter, French fighter, who is really good. Obviously, he was defeated in the rematch, with Munguia. But I mean, let's be honest. I mean, if he's able to put out Munguia, Canelo should have definitely been able to, but it's because Canelo was just not the same. And with Charlo and Golovkin, I don't think even in his prime he'd be able to, maybe Charlo, but it's clear with the Skull fight, Skull just ran the entire fight and just pot shotted, so that didn't count for me because everyone was the Skull fight he didn't look that good. I think that was more on Skull just running for 12 rounds and pot shotting, and Canelo not wanting to waste energy chasing him, which is something he would do in his prime. In his prime, he would have caught him, but it would have taken a lot of energy, and I understand it. But looking back on it, he hasn't been the same since he lost to Dimitri Bivol in 2022. And 2022, he's just not the same. He's not the same, and we saw that tonight. And I think this performance is a great. It proves that it proves that Bud Crawford is the best fighter in the world, and he's the best boxer of this era. He's the greatest fighter since Floyd. He is. Now, obviously, we're never gonna know. And I like how Roy Jones was taking shots at Floyd, saying, "Oh man, Floyd never." I'm like, man, and I'm just saying, man. I'm just saying, Floyd never fought Terence Crawford. He could have fought him. What is he? Like, no, he couldn't have. He was never gonna fight. Also, at that point, I think if Bud Crawford fought Floyd in 2017, I think that Bud loses. I think Bud loses. I think Floyd would be bigger and faster than Bud at that point, who was still in his 20s, or yeah. So, but he is this era's GOAT in terms of being an all-time legend. Now, he's gonna, in my opinion, he's always gonna share that and I think that I'll talk about Noya Inoue in the next video. Noya Inoue is the next generation's GOAT. I think he has the potential to be the generation after, because let's be honest, Bud's not gonna have too much longer. And even though he won this fight, it's not even his era anymore. He's an era fighter of the 2010 to 2020 era who's still fighting this era. And is he the greatest fighter since Floyd? He is. Now, personally, I share that with Usyk. I'm going to make a pound-for-pound video about Crawford, Usyk. Obviously, about my ranking, but probably just about the three of them mostly. That being Crawford anyway, and of course, Alexander Usyk. Because I go on the fence all the time. Would Usyk beat Crawford if they were the same way? I don't know. Who knows? We'll never know, obviously. But for me as a for me as a fan, it sucked to watch Canelo in this fight last night. And honestly, as a kid, this this reminded me a lot of the Floyd fight. And what Bud did is he had the combos of Bivol and the movement and defense of Floyd, and that's how he beat Canelo last night. It proves you that Bud Crawford's the best boxer of this era. Now, I said this last night in the stream. If Bud fought Canelo in 2020, 2021, is this the same result? No, I don't think it is. Hold on a second. All right, sorry about that. We're back. But yeah, I'm kind of summing up things about it, man. This fight proved that Bud Crawford is the best fighter in the world, and it proves that he is. Is he the face of boxing? I he yeah. In terms of the American culture of people in the United States, which is the dominant it's the it's the primary country in the world. It's America. Blah blah whatever. He is the most known boxer now. Worldwide, probably a tie between him and Usyk anyway, a three-way tie, but he is now up there. Canelo's stock doesn't go down. It just and everyone's saying, oh man, like, and listen to me, like, this is still Canelo. This is still a great fighter in Canelo. I'm not saying that like he's terrible after the Bivol fight. He's not as when he lost that night. He lost something. He lost something when he fought Bivol that night. Bivol took something from him, whether it was part of his spirit or his determination, or he's just been more cautious, and he hasn't. And I think he got hit a lot that night, and I think he's shored up his defensive. I mean, as good as Crawford was last night, he didn't he didn't blow. I mean, the fact that he won this fight in a mix of how Bivol and Mayweather beat Canelo. That's what, and in that way, it is a unique performance that he did it. Now he's fighting a Canelo who, even though Bud's older, Bud's had a lot. He's had a lot less wear and tear, and he's been less active, which you thought would be a detriment against him. Actually, I think it's a good thing. He's not been as active and not been fighting crazily much in his latter years, which is really good. I think for his stamina and much everything, really. I think because of that, and like, I think one thing people said, "Oh man, Canelo will never live down losing to a smaller guy." If you watch that fight and you didn't know anything about either boxer, you'd think that Bud was probably a former junior middleweight or a former middleweight champion. He didn't look like a 147 that night. Last night. He did not look like a 147 or a 140 guy. No way. And that was part of winning the fight. He won other parts. I say mentally. I think that Canelo, looking back on it in the middle of the rounds, I think Canelo knew he was going to lose. Like when he sat down with Eddie Reynoso, and I love Eddie Reynoso. I didn't love his commentary and advice for Canelo most of the rounds. He was like, all right, let's try to do these punches. I think at some point Eddie had to realize that Canelo needs to go at him and just and risk it. But Canelo doesn't, you could see it. Even the moments where he tried to go at him, he got hit. And because of that, he even showed up more and, got more cautious and more gun shy. And I never thought I'd sit here and call Canelo Alvarez gun shy, but he was. And, and people have called him that in the last 4 or 5 fights. I haven't, but I'm almost forced to now. And I think both guys' careers will go on. I don't know what happens from here. I'm assuming that Crawford isn't going to defend middleweight titles. I haven't watched post of an interview. Whatever he says in that interview, I think is pretty much null. I don't think that matters really. Canelo saying that the Bud's better than Floyd is interesting because Canelo was 22 or 23 when he fought Floyd and it was well before his own prime. So, because personally, I believe that the Canelo that beat Triple G in 2018, I think, has a good chance to beat the Floyd he fought and a good chance to beat the Bud he fought last night. I'm not saying he would, but that Canelo was the best I've ever seen. But then again, it's all speculation. So, those are my thoughts overall on Canelo versus Crawford. Yeah, and I'll mention more of the stuff in the big boxing weekend review show, but I just wanted to make this video right now just to go. You know what? Great fight. And in terms of the fight itself, people were saying it was going to be this like they know it was going to be a war. This is kind of how the fight had to go for Bud to win. For Canelo to win, the fight had to be different. Bud would have to run more and less punching for Canelo to win. Because even if Bud was more active and tried to make it a war, looking back at what I saw last night, Canelo would have maybe hurt him a couple, would have hit him more, but he would have got hit more, and he would have gotten gun shy a lot more early than he did. And also, he was, Canelo's always been kind of a slow starter. He was turtle slow last night getting started. He didn't land anything really clean until like round 2 or 3. I mean, and Crawford landed one good shot in the first 45 seconds, or first minute and a half. And I think all those factors go into the fact of how Terence Bud Crawford defeated Canelo Alvarez. And as I've said before, I don't hate Terence Crawford. He's a great boxer. I give him all respect in the world. I've never been a fan, and it's nothing good. And I respect him and I admire him, and I guess to say I'm a root for him in life and everything. I've never been a Bud Crawford fan, and it's not because he doesn't get knockouts. When he gets knockouts, he's an exciting guy. It just has to do with not his mindset, which most guys of his level have that mindset. It's the fact that he's more his personality, where he's got a very he's very chill, and I love chill fighters, but I think that I'm not saying it's a front. I just don't think behind the scenes he's as chill as he portrays. He walks out and he's like, "Yeah, I'm chill. I'm gonna win this fight." I think behind the scenes he's a little more intense and very competitive, as we know. I just wish he would show that more, because I think a part of him doesn't want to be viewed as Michael Jordan when it's the biggest compliment you can ever get. But still, that's just my opinion, whatever. But he is a great fighter. I give him all the credit in the world. He's the best fighter in the world right now. I think that is he the undisputed best in the world? There's no one better. Not even close. No, I think there's interesting things to go around it. I think that there is, in my opinion, there's an argument for Usyk, and there's an argument for Inoue. There's even a small argument for Bivol. I mean, there's an argument for Beterbiev. There's an argument for all these guys. Obviously it's not a great argument. Not going to win it, but has proven everything. But I'm going to make my pound for pound list. I'm going to be taking his age into account. Now, if he was 33 or even 34 or 35, I'd have him above all of them, because Usyk is older. But we'll see, where I put it. But he's proven he is the best boxer. He is the best boxer on planet Earth, pretty much, and there's no real disputing that. And he won this fight easily. And when I say easily, the scorecards were close, the fight wasn't. In terms of Canelo never really had him hurt. And Bud never had him hurt, but as you see up here, he landed clean far more. And Canelo won rounds just by kind of being active. And those are the rounds that Bud was more defensive, and he would kind of shell up, and he'd stick and move great. But the rounds that he needed to bank, as he said before the fight, he banked, and he got it done. So that's my thoughts on Canelo versus Crawford. See you guys in the next video. And greatest fighters always leave it all in the final round. See you guys.